Okay, so this is a quick video just to show you how to apply textures in Hypershade correctly to your model so you can see how the workflow goes. What I've got here is a wireframe car. It's actually got no material, so first thing I'm going to do is, obviously I'm working in one screen, click on the viewport tool here to show my Hypershade and my workable viewport at the same time. And then what I need to do is create a new material. I'm going to call this one this Blin, and I'm going to just select the car, right click on the material and say assign. And if I click on number 5, you can see there you go, you got a grey Blin applied. You could actually apply a Lambert. That would just take the shine off. You see it takes the shine, but for our purposes in this demo, I'm just going to apply it as a Blin. So select that, assign the Blin. Let me just delete the Lambert just by hitting delete on my keyboard. So I have a Blin assigned. What I need to do now is assign the 4 texture maps I want to apply. So first off, let's apply the color map. So to get the attribute editor up, with the work area visible of the Hypershade, just double click on the Blin, and that automatically calls up the Hypershade, the attribute editor for that Blin with all the material name, the sample, the type. See, it's obviously a Blin, and color, transparency, and all the other details for your Blin. So first thing is, color is set there. See, if I play that, you can see that it's actually affecting the wheels, but it actually is the body as well. And what I want to do is I want to click on this little icon here, which is black and white checker box, and that brings up the create render node. And because we're applying a texture, all we need to do is click on the word file, which is the 4th one down, and it takes us to the file input panel. And just to show you what's happening in the Hypershade, if I zoom out, you can see that the Hypershade has 3 nodes. It's got the place 2D texture node, it's got the file, which is obviously where I'm going to drop in my texture that I created earlier, and the original Blin, but because there's no textures applied, it looks black there. So you can either click on this little arrow or click in the Hypershade here to get back to the image mode section, and then on the browser just click on it, and we're going to go look for my texture or a texture apply. And I know for this one I'm looking in car textures 1, and because I know that I've named my color textures car and a underscore map, I'm just gonna click on each one, and you can see I get a visual of what that texture will be. I'm gonna load version 3. If I open that, it appears here and it appears in the Hypershade. So at this point I need to apply this to the model so that I can actually see it appear. So I'm just going to minimize that one, select the car, right click and say assign material just to make sure it's there. And if you still can't see the material, press number 6 and that should show it up. Now it's actually appearing on the car. I'm just going to assign that. It's not, doesn't seem to be appearing on the body of the car. I'm just going to check my UVs to make sure that's okay, but it should appear on the car. The reason why my car texture is not appearing on my car is because I've got my viewport render set to high quality. So if you set yours back to default, There you go, you should see the car texture. Another way you can do this is if you leave it on high quality, just click off this icon here in the viewport and that'll show it up as well. So there you go, we've got the car with the textures applied. Now it's actually got some default lighting. You can see there's a base specular appearing because I've used a base blend texture. So I've got these kind of highlights as I orbit around. You can see that the car is highlighted with this little glow hotspot. If I switch to my lighting and say use no lights, the car is totally dull, and the only thing that's picking up the only thing that's giving off the actual visuals is the texture itself. So what I need to do now is I'm just going to click on shading and say wireframe unshaded switched off, and now I'm going to apply other textures to this just to give this a little bit more detail. So to do that, if you just double click on the blend again, and I'm just going to see if I can pull this over a bit. There we go. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rearrange my viewport so you guys can get a better view of what's going on. If you look at this viewport here, which is perspective and graph, I'm going to click on that one, and that puts the car in the top view, and it changes this to the function curve or graph editor, and I'm going to switch this one to the Hypershade. You can do that just by clicking on panels, panel, Hypershade. And there we go, we can actually see my Hypershade view. So just so you guys can see what's going on. There we go. So if I click on the blend, it brings up this attribute editor again. The next texture I want to add is I'm going to add my ambient color. It's exactly the same way as I added my base diffuse or color map. You just click on the checker box. The create render node appears. Click on the word file. It switches back to the image input directory path, and just click on the browser. And because I named my ambient texture AMB, there we go, and that's what my ambient looks like. I'm going to open that up. The ambient goes in there, and as you can see already, my work area is really kind of cluttered now and confused as to what's going on. To clean this up, this nice little icon here between the clear graph and the graph material unselected is the rearrange graph. So if you click on that, that rearranges the graph. And if you just middle mouse, right alt and right mouse to zoom out, then middle mouse to pan, you can now see I have the blend itself, the color map, and the ambient map. And to make sure this is actually applied, if I click in this view and say, just check that lighting's not on, I click in this view and say renderer high quality. That extra glow that you're seeing is the ambient, and to prove that the ambient is given the base texture, this extra kind of luminosity and brightness here and here, you can see it's got some noise there, but just to prove that that's working, if I zoom in my Hypershade and then select this connection between the ambient and the blend sphere, when you select it, it should turn yellow. Click delete. I've broken the connections between the ambient and the blend, and of course my car's gone black because the ambient has been switched off. Ambience is really seen when you're working in high quality renderer for the viewport. If you switch to default, then the default just illuminates it. Okay, if I switch to high quality, you see it's broken. Now to reconnect it, just here we go. Just left click, middle mouse, click drag to the blend and say default drop. See, my mistake, that wasn't default drop. I need to do that again. Middle mouse on the ambient and then drag it over to the blend, and this, I should have said ambient color. There you go, and that switches back on the connection between the ambient file and the blend. You can see the car reappeared. So right now we've got the ambient applied and the color map applied. We need to also apply the normal map. So once again, select the main blend. You can see the attributes will appear, and you can see already I've got the color and the ambient there. The normal map is a little bit more tricky in that the normal map placement is under the bump mapping, and what you need to do is click on this checker box here. Brings up the create render node again. Click on file, and this time file brings up the bump value and the bump depth. Now bump value is connected to a file placement, so what we need to do is, if I click on this black arrow, that'll take me to a file input path. But before I click on that, because we're already in this screen, just make sure you click the use as from bump to tangent space, because we're going to be using a normal map and it needs to be on tangent space normals. So once you have that set, click on this little arrow and you got the familiar image name. Click on the folder and you're looking for the NRM, which is normal, and you can see there's two normal maps there. I'm going to click on this one with the wheel. I'm going to say open, and again you can see that my Hypershade work area has got cluttered, so I need to rearrange the graph. Hold down my Alt and right mouse to zoom out. You can see that I have the normal map texture applied, the bump controls for that texture, and it's going to my blend. And it's kind of hard to see if the normal map is there, but it is applied. If you want to actually bump it up to see that it's applied, just click on the adjustment, the bump to the placement node, and you can actually play with the bump depth. Or if you actually want to see a quicker response, just leave that at 1. Type that 1 there. Switch it back to bump, and you should see more noise appearing. Now if I hit render, I'm just going to hit a quick render so you can see. And my background is set to white, so I'm going to just quickly just pull the image in so you can see what's going on. So that's an image rendered, and you can see my background is white. So what I should do is minimize this for a sec. I click on the view and say select camera. It's going to go down to where the camera has environment. Make that darker. In fact, let's make that a subtle shade there, like a blue. If I now click on this viewport, right click in there and say render again, there you go. See, I've just changed that to white, to blue. Now you see how we've this little rough noisy edge there, especially here. That's the fact that I got it set to bump. If I just orbit this around, just gonna zoom in on the wheel, hit render again, and you can see there, you can see on the tire that we have the normal map, and there's normal map effects there, but it's kind of messy and dirty because it's actually got the bump applied. So I'm going to just minimize that, go back to my Hypershade, click on the bump control node and say tangent space normal. Right click in this viewport again, say render, and it actually doesn't look that much smoother, but it has changed. It could be that there's noise coming through. I'm just going to bring the bump depth down a bit. Let's try that. Hit render again. There you go, and you can see that the noise is actually changing. In fact, let's try and get it closer to 0. It's 139. Let's try a quick render on that. There you go. So by changing the bump depth with tangent space normal, you can actually control the level of noise that comes through from the normal map. And just to prove that, let me just zoom in again even further on the wheel so you can see the wheel. In fact, if I'm just going to select the wheels and hit E just to give them a nice rotation. There we go. If you just watch the tread on that wheel when I hit render, there you go. You can see that we got depth in there because the normal map is making it look like it's got depth. And if I click on that node again, boost up the bump depth and hit render one more time, you can see it's more noisy because there's more depth in there. And also you can see it here on the edging. So I'm just gonna pull that down to about 0.25, I think is good. And then one more time I hit a render. And there you go. So the normal map is being applied and it is working. Now, last thing you need to apply is a specular highlight map. So one more time, click on the blend. This time we need to pan down, scroll down to specular shading options, and we want specular color. So if I click on the little checker box for specular color, do file, and I got car A spec 01. You see this is a specular map. If I say open, and then in my viewport I need to clean this up, so I'm going to say rearrange graph. There we go, and I'm just going to hit render. It's kind of hard to see where the spec is working because the ambient is so bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly tone down the ambient to see if that will show up the specs. If I click on the, let's click on my, yeah, okay, so yeah, I'm going to tone down the ambient, I'm going to reapply it, and then see if the spec is going to actually show up. So this is, so got another ambient map, so what I'm going to do is just zoom out here, set that, frame that one, there we go. So if I set the blend and say ambient file, and I'm going to load up, this one's called ambient 01. You can see it's a little bit darker. It's the original, it's just a toned down one. So I'm going to open up ambient. You can see immediately it darkens the entire car, and specular color is being applied. Let's just do a quick run to see if it's being picked up. It's not showing up too much, and if you find that specular isn't giving you the results that you want, and that's just because I've got it applied in specular color, you can actually put it into specular roll-off. So if we go to where specular is, I'm just going to come down here, select that one. In fact, you can actually select the entire section for specular, delete it, click in the blend. This time I'm going to say specular roll-off. Let's click on specular roll-off. Same thing again, file, look for the specular map, open it, and I clear it up. I'm going to just turn on my lighting to see. The lighting is just, there we go, now that's blank out, so let's try a render on that and see if that brings it up. And in fact it is. You can see some of it there. Just going to zoom in a little bit further, see if we can pick some of this up. There's some lines there, there's a line there. Kind of hard to see because that's actually, make sure I got the right one switched on because it's quite easy to switch the wrong one. So use no lights, high quality render. There we go. That's new. That's high quality render. And if I just keep your eye on this area here, if I hit render again, you can see that is actually being picked up by the specular. So the specular is there. There might be some tweaking, but it does work. Okay. So that's basically how you apply the 4 textures of color, ambient, normal, and specular to your model. Bearing in mind that you will have to export these textures along with your OBJ or FBX file to your game engine to actually see them appear in the game engine. Just a little quick note, there are some other things you can do. You can actually modify and tweak and play with this. What I've got here is I've just got 4 textures applied. If I click on blend, I can actually start doubling up some of my textures. You can see obviously I've got an ambient applied already. If I wanted to, I could add one of my already pre-existing textures and give it some extra effects. For instance, I have reflectivity set to 5.0. Again, I could add a specular color to that. If I click on that checker box and save file, and I can throw in my specular again. Okay. And then when you do the render, let's have a quick look how this looks in the render. A little bit of extra reflectivity, and also if I click back on the blend, I'm just going to clean this up. So I've got the reflectivity is that one. You can just tell just by hovering over it. If I select that and delete that one and then go back to blend, and this time let's add eccentricity, and again use the same specular file just to see if it will enhance my texture. Again, clean it up, and if you hit render, yeah, you can see it's just adding extra. It's just emphasizing where I've got the highlight on my spec. So you can see if I pan around there, just adding a little bit eccentricity to the spec. And again, render, and you can see there it's on the edges there, and especially where we had it before on that line. So that's just some of the things you can do using the 4 textures. You can actually you can even play around with it for different effects. I mean, I've actually got the ambient as this gray map. If I really wanted to, I could select the ambient, click on the file, and throw in one of my my original color map to, instead of the ambient, in that place. So if I say open, if I hit render, you can see that the color's actually got a darker, richer tone to it. And what's happening is it's looking at the color map as if it was an ambient, because it's actually in the ambient slot, and it's just doing a multiply on the colors. Let's do another render. You can see the colors are either doubled up on the brightness or doubled up on the color value. So sometimes I'll play with that. You know, there's lots of little experiments you can do with that. I'm just going to switch that back to the ambient 01 color. And there you go, it tones it down. And to prove that, if I hit render, there we go, it's a little bit toned down with just the speck appearing there. So that's basically how you apply the 4 maps to your Hypershade. And obviously there's a few of the keys I've mentioned. Obviously the rearrange graph, when you want to make sure your graph is rearranged so you can see what's going on. Yeah, there's a few of the commands we've got here, and I'm going to cover these. Like for instance, if I just click on this one, just the blend, and click on this one arrow, it just shows me the output connections. If I click on the input output connections, it shows me the entire tree. If I click on the input, it just shows me the input. So you can see how we have you know, the setup for the hierarchy. So you can actually create other assets from selected nodes, and you can remove assets. So you can do a lot of extra work. You can show next graph, show previous graph, and there's a lot of things that you'll actually see that we'll cover in later date when we start doing things like ambient occlusions and baking out textures and doing other tests. Okay. So that kind of wraps it up for this video, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.